Hi, welcome to our May 7th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test on my end, and we'll just make sure our audio is coming through as expected. And then we'll go ahead and get started. We'll let some people get logged in. Hi, welcome to our May 7th, Okay, so it sounds like audio is coming through my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply submit questions by asking them in the live chat field. As you ask questions, if we could try to make sure that if we don't try to repeat the same question, because often people's ability to ask questions can far exceed my ability to answer them when we get a lot of people, especially beginning, kind of asking questions. So if we could try not to repeat the same question over and over again, that would make everything much faster. Also, if when asking a question, if you could say I'm running Windows 10 with Cubase 11 Pro or Cubase Elements with whatever, operating system, Cubase Elements on Mac OS, Big Sur, that information is sometimes very helpful. So like many of you during kind of pandemic times, my family's at home, so you may hear my wife working directly above me, and you may hear my son may interrupt when he gets back from school. He'll be very happy because it's his last day of school for the week. So, but I'll apologize for any particular interruptions in advance. So, and occasionally I may lose some of my chat field because I may be behind the chat to keep the questions chronologically. So if I lose a couple questions, I'll apologize in advance for that. And we will get started in a couple minutes. If you're on the live stream and you're watching this live, make sure that you actually tell us who you are, do a quick introduction, tell us who you are, where you're from. That's always helpful. And so we'll go ahead and get started. And if this is your first live stream, let us know that as well. And so let's go ahead and take a quick couple minutes to see who is on the live stream. So we see Sir Robert Robinson. He's been consistent in getting in early. So we see Uno from Finland. We have Dom from Cambodia. Welcome for joining us. We have Agent K, who's kind enough to do some moderation for us when needed, but most people are pretty well behaved. Also, if you wanted to search for previous Cubase topics that were covered in Cubase Hangouts or Cubase live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. So that's Jan, who maintains and sets up that site. And one other fantastic resource of information is going to be the Cubase Nation Discord. And we have Jazz Dude who helps out with that in addition to some other people. So just a quick shout out to those people. All right, so we have Moshi Marketing. We have John Wells. All right. All right, we have Filter Freak from bragging of his 17th session from sunny UK. All right, so we have John Costigan from the west coast of Lake Michigan, otherwise known as Kenosha. We have Gareth, who's on time from España. All right, so we have Johnny Swing, I believe, who's from Pittsburgh. We have Detlef Randerath. So I was just watching your YouTube videos, Detlef, of your Sade and your Billy Idol bass covers. Nice job and a performance. All right, so we have Ted Springman from Los Angeles. All right, so we have Terrence 2020 from Berkshire, UK. All right, so we have South Africa, Space Crawler. All right, so we have Service from Bavaria. All right, so we have Matthias from Hamburg. We have Brian Sawyer from Crystal Coast, North Carolina. All right, so we have Melbourne. We have Mike from Melbourne, Australia. Okay, so let's go ahead and... All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. And if you haven't subscribed to the Club Cubase YouTube channel. Make sure you do that. And if you learn something new, the handy tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button. And those things enable us to, and as well as views, enable us to continue to do these live streams. So we appreciate the support. Okay. All right, so we had from Uno, says asked earlier, but not a decisive answer. When I export the audio mix down, when I put a check mark in do nothing, Cubase starts the song when the mix down is complete. Cubase Pro 1102, Windows 10 PC. So, every time that I've done this, and I'll just do a quick export here as well. So I would say I'll do my export audio mix down, and I'll just do a quick stereo mix. And as we do this, I'll just say, let's add this to our job queue. And after export, I think Uno has it set to do nothing as well, but I'll just do the start queue export. And let's say I will just go ahead and do this as a WAV file. So we'll say start queue export. So I did it as an MP3, and Cubase didn't start playing. And if I do it, I'll do another job queue. So I'll remove this, and let's add this as a job queue. So we'll have a 48K WAV file. I'll just say export. And then it's, again, it doesn't play. So I'm not sure what's causing the mixdown file to play back. So I'm not sure, if it is, maybe Uno, if you could just confirm again that it is, that it's playing back in Cubase, and you see the meters in Cubase as opposed to just hearing the mixdown file play back, but you actually see the meters in Cubase. And I think what I mentioned before, and I wasn't able to recreate this, and maybe if someone else has seen this or can confirm either way, that could be helpful. But as, we kind of get, as I work with this, sometimes, I will sometimes, download a file and it immediately opens up in iTunes because it's a WAV file. So I just wanted to see if it was Cubase that's actually playing, if you see the Cubase icon play, and also in your export audio mix down, if you just come over here and make sure that you don't have real-time export checked, that would do kind of, the mix down in real time. So if you could let us know those things, if the real-time export is checked, or if it's actually just playing back where you see the meters of all the tracks in Cubase responding. All right. All right, so we had a question from, can you apply and explain each flatten arrange track option in the dialog window? So let me see, I think I have a project with some arranger track functionality in it. Let me see if it's in my recent list. It may not be. All right, so I'll come over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the different. So when we look at our arranger track, and if you're not familiar with the arranger track, what you could do is to define different sections of your song and create kind of a non-linear arrangement. So let's go ahead and look at the flatten chain options. So when I click on flatten chain, it's going to basically take my non-linear arrangement and turn it into a linear arrangement. Okay, so if we wanted to, we could choose to do from the source, whether because we could have different play order chains. So we could say the current chain, but if we had multiple versions of the same song, we could just simply choose a different, play order chain here. So in a different arrangement. Our destination, we could just have it go directly to a new project, or have the flattened chain just immediately appear directly in our current project, or have it turn into a new project there. So some of the options, we can keep the arranger track active. So let's see what if we choose rename arranger events. Okay, so we also have where we see this make real event copies, and what this could do is automatically, as the events are repeated over and over again, if you choose to make real event copies, if we've made a change in, these will be kind of, as they're flattened, each of these will be mapped to different events that could be repeated over and over again. So if we don't have the make real event copies, this will automatically, if I made a change in an earlier part of the arrangements that's repeated multiple times in a particular part, that would be automatically updated in the other parts. But we have make real event copies chosen. At that point, we could just, those would all be independent. So the data won't be linked. So if I make a change to one, it's not going to affect the other ones. So if we didn't want it to split the event, so if we had an arranger event that was kind of tied in, we could choose not to have it split the events. Other options, and this could be depending if we enable new project, is to automatically open the new project or cascade the new project, so that you could see both of those. And so with if we do a new project, you could keep the same chain name, or just add a number to increment the differences between those. So if you haven't played with the arranger track, it's a great way where, I have one project, and we see it a lot in people doing for advertising or media, where it's okay, I have a 2 minute, a 1 minute, a 60 second, 30 second, 15, 5 second arrangement that I need to generate. All right, so question 2, I'd like to create 2 track versions and have both in the same project with all the MIDI audio clips. Is this possible? So if you wanted to, just take, I'm just going to reread this, make sure yeah, so you could definitely have, multiple. So if I wanted to come here, I could take all of these particular tracks here, and, if I wanted to do new track versions of all those, I could undo that. We could also choose to duplicate that version. So if we wanted to jump back and do editing on one particular track version that wasn't in, that we could have those selected, and we could now just kind of toggle back and forth. So you could definitely have, just make sure it's, so, you could definitely have, 2 track versions, both in the same project, with audio MIDI, no problems. All right, so we have a question. It's rather a unique question. Do you know how to make a growling sound in Retrolog 2? Thanks in advance. So a lot of times growling sounds, I would kind of think of, maybe filters for something like that. So let's go just take a quick look and see if we get something to kind of growl a little bit. So we'll add an instrument track. I'm not the best synthesizer programmer, so no one would confuse me being a sound designer, but let's start off with maybe maybe a bass part. Okay. So let's say I have this sound. So you can see just kind of the cutoff and a combination of the resonance. And then, so you can see just kind of the cutoff and a combination of the resonance. And then, so you can see just kind of the cutoff and a combination of the resonance. 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 And a combination of the So the combination of those two. That's probably what I would go for, but a growl, one person's growl could not be another. But those are the two components that I would probably kind of play around with just to kind of maybe. So those are kind of the parameters that I would probably play around with just to kind of get a typical growl. And it's kind of starting from like a sawtooth. So, and you could probably adjust. But probably a sawtooth would be good place to start. So give that a try and let me know if that's kind of in rough step what you were thinking of. All right. All right. So, all right. You see a great comment from Ted Springman. Says he's been working with George in the Hamburg office on a hashtag-driven database of all things Cubase, and it's now live on Steinberg support page under Cubase Video Tutorial Database. That's wonderful, Ted. Thanks for sharing. I'm glad we finally seen some something come of that. So, and we appreciate all your support. Okay. Okay. All right, just going through comments here. My chat field jumped on me. Okay. Okay, so we see John from Austin, Texas. All right, so we see James from Pylon Records and what he describes as gloomy LA. Okay, Michael Fillingham wants people to hit the like button. And Ted Springman wants it to be like a piñata, so. Okay, so just see a comment. We had a discussion last live stream about changing the EXEC files to CPR did not work. They are actually just Cubase VST 32 full songs with no audio, all MIDI. Does that mean I need Cubase VST 32 to resurrect these songs? So the file formats for like VST 32, was the file extensions was a .all, like a .all for a song, and then there was arrangement files, which were .arr files. So I don't think that the EXEC files were actually, a Cubase specific file extension of any kind. If you wanted to import .all or .arr files, you could download from the Steinberg website. You could download Cubase SX3, and that's the last version that would allow you to import .all, .arr files. So you could try that and maybe change it to a .all or .arr extension. But the EXEC files, I'm inclined to think that maybe those aren't Cubase files. So. Okay, so we just see Mark Rabins also says my audio plays back also after export, and it's loud. So, Yeah, if you could let me know if it plays, if it's actually playing back in Cubase, or if it's doing through, or if you see it going through like the Cubase mixer as well. Okay, so we have a question from Mike Bello. I recently found out that Cubase can have up to 3 separate mix consoles. Is it possible to create a key command to switch between them? So I don't think there's a key command to switch between the 3 different mix consoles, even though I believe that they can be, I'll just make sure, but they can each have their own mix. So you could see right here we have mix console 2 and 3. They could each have their own independent key command, but not a key command that cycles between the different mix consoles. And we can find this under the devices studio category. So take a look there, and that's where you could set it, but it doesn't cycle between them. It'll just kind of have those 3 different mix consoles that could be independently called up with their own unique keyboard shortcut. All right, wonderful to see Pablo Vasquez from Galicia, España. All right, and also Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, great to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo as well. Okay, so a question from Michael. Can we record a song from our phone and manipulate it? If so, how? So, as long as, there are Cubase versions available for Android and for iOS. So if you have Cubase as your app, you could, sequence and do editing and recording directly on your phone without any problems. Otherwise, if it's just like an audio file recording, you may have to just, many people will just play it and record it and capture it back in, depending on the file format, because it may not record as a standard WAV file. But as long as you could get the audio file from your phone to a standard format, you could then just import that audio file directly into the project. But if you are considering doing a lot of active mobile production, consider Cubase. It was just updated this week to or last week to 3.3, so there's a lot of great new features in there. But many people will do that. All right, so I just see from clarification from Uno Memento, it says it's Cubase playing the song after do nothing, no real-time export checked. So I haven't seen that behavior. And I see Mark is mentioning, asking if he has if he has loop enabled on the main project window. So maybe if it's in a loop mode. All right, so we have Peter checking in from Canada. See a great comment from Tim Weinheimer. It's like, when I started using the arranger track, I made some big breakthroughs on some of my songs I got stuck on. So yeah, it's a great way to kind of audition different arrangement ideas. So, all right, wonderful to see Millard Brown on the live stream, as well as Matt Elston from London, and Millard's from Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. Okay, so just see from Michael Fillingham, nice growler. So hopefully that was maybe in the right vein of what you're thinking. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so I just see a question from Kim. What would be a similar way to do a collect all and save like it is done in Ableton? So I'm not sure what the collect all and save function is. Maybe if you could specify, but if it's, taking audio files or loops maybe that are used in different locations and consolidating them to a common folder, what you may want to do is just go to your media bay. And then I'll just go to something that has some audio files in it. So as soon as I come here, we go to the media bay and you'll see this little function that says prepare archive. And what that will allow you to do is, and we could access this from inside the media bay too, but you could, basically when you do a prepare archive, this would move all the files that are maybe in different folders and different locations, different hard drives or disks, and that would move it into the project folder's audio file subfolder. But if I'm misunderstanding, Kim, just if maybe you could specify and explain what the collect all and save is from Ableton. I just see from is it Larrabee Beats, my Cubase 11 Pro crashes so very much. So just out of curiosity, if you try running it without third-party components, and you could actually start the program by holding down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift if you're on Mac, and see if that alleviates that. So a lot of times, when people are running a lot of third-party components, that's when you could run into more issues. So, but if you could let us know if you have the same consistent behavior, maybe it's an older version of a plugin that needs to be updated, something like that is often what causes crashes. Okay, and then I see kind of further clarification. So crashes without any plugin. So if you have like a crash log, which will be generated, you can feel free to email that to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. And if you let me know what country you're from, I could probably pass it along and we could maybe try to get it figured out for you. All right, wonderful to see Captenergy Music as well as Jazz Dude on the live stream. Okay, so we just have a question. Is it normal for Cubase to take a second before playing back? When I press play, Cubase doesn't start right away compared to Ableton or Pro Tools. So generally it's not, but that, that delay, so when I come here and I just kind of hit start and stop, you can see it's pretty instantaneous. Sometimes some things that could be causing that could be, plugins that you might have in a master bus that are kind of look ahead, that have a lot of latency. So you can come over here. The first thing to do is to make sure that you're running the appropriate driver for Cubase. So if we come to your device or your studio menu to studio setup, when you click on audio system, make sure that you're using one of the audio drivers for, or the, ASIO or core audio driver for your audio interface, and you're not using like, generic low latency or built in, and then routing it through the computer's operating system. And as you're doing it with projects, just see if when you play just an empty project with no plugins, and see if it's kind of responsive when you hit play. So a lot of times it could be, when people load up a plugin that has a lot of latency. So let's say if I just load up kind of a multi-band compressor multiple times here. So just load this up, and this plugin will have some, latency in it. So I'll just do this a couple more times. Okay, so if you have like a big chain of plugins, so now when I hit play, you'll see that there's going to be more of a latency. So I'll just hit play here on start, and then it's not going to be instantaneous because it's going through all of these plugins. So if you're running that, make sure that you disable plugins, and you could do that quickly just by coming over here to the bottom left-hand corner. It's the very left edge of the transport, and this is called constrained delay compensation. And that will automatically bypass plugins, and now you should see, almost instantaneous performance. So, it's probably going to be, if you have, I would just, if you have a lot of plugins in your project, just simply turn that on or off. Or if you're running something like VST Connect, if you have that on, that could be causing a similar kind of delay, because it may be still feeding out to a signal to nowhere over the internet and looking for, to synchronize. So those are a couple of things to check out. But, generally it's not normal. It should be pretty instantaneous for your transport. All right, so we see that Pablo is famous still from Michael Teams. That's great. Okay, so we have a question from okay, sorry, just okay, so we have a question. Says, hi from Jamaica, Queens. Are there any tutorials for becoming more proficient in Hallian, Retrolog, etc.? So yeah, there's a number of Retrolog tutorials, and there is, I was watching some Hallian videos. This guy is an English guy. I think it's like something. I'm sure I'm forgetting it. I'm sure it's on the Cubase Nation Discord. But it's kind of like Born to Write a Song or something like that. But it's an English guy who's really good and did a bunch of wonderful tutorials, like, several hours worth of Hallian. So there are a lot of tutorials available online for that. So you can see a lot of the Retrolog and Pad Shop you could see directly on the Steinberg YouTube channels in the VST Instruments section. But you shouldn't, and Hallian is going to be like a third party, but you could check out like the Cubase Nation Discord. I'm sure it's in there. Jazz Dude can correct me if I'm mistaken. And I see other people recommending the same thing. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How to render VSTI and after unload it so that the VSTI and unload that VSTI in one click? Thanks. Okay, so let's just do a new project. Okay. All right, so say I'll just record something quickly. Just come here and okay. So if I wanted to, and just make sure I have the question right. So it'd say, okay, so it says render VSTI and after unload that VSTI in one click. So if I have the track selected here, I could just turn this into, as opposed to the event, and we go to render and place, that you could just go to your render settings. And you could, once you have this done, I could just say remove source tracks, and I want to keep the channel settings. So at this point, I have, my particular track here. So I'll just say render, and that will render it, turn it into an audio file. And then it's going to just remove the original track. And all I have now is just the audio file itself and the other track completely unloaded. Another function that you could do with this, so if you want to do that, is if you're looking to, like, where maybe you wanted to keep it, you could also choose to, disable the source tracks. So as soon as I disable the source tracks, and you could also click to hide. So at this point, if you want it to be there, now this track won't take any memory, won't take any processing, but you can go to the visibility if you needed to do an edit on the MIDI, and the MIDI is still there, but the track itself is disabled. Okay. Okay, so question, is it possible to make the focus of the different mix consoles priority when using Mackie control? I want to say that there's kind of a clever, there might be a keyboard shortcut, so the Mackie control is going to be controlling generally kind of the mix console itself, but I think that there's maybe a key command that might help. I think it might be under focus. So try, maybe if you incorporate this key command to switch the focus area, that might do it. So, and there's like different, for set remote control for focus on next plugin. Yeah, but there's also the activate, deactivate focused object. So, but try experimenting with the focus category here under key commands. And I think that, you could give that a try. Okay, so just see, I understood Kim's question about collecting all your different media scattered around. So thanks for letting me know, Kim. Okay, and Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay, so we have a question from Ricardo. How to automate punch-in recording. Okay, so all we have to do is, let's say if I have an audio track here, right, and I want to set up, and the punch in and punch out points could be set just by the left and right locators. So if you say, okay, I just wanted to punch in just this little spot, you could now hit the letter P. And what you want to do is just to hit I and O. So we could say, and we can see this indicated right here. So we have punch in, punch out, and it's just I and O. So once those are turned on, I have that track activated. So now I'll play, and you'll just see a punch in to record and punch out of that particular area. So that's all you have to do is, figure out where you want to punch in and punch out and set your left and right locators there, and then hit the letters I and O, and that could automate the punch in process. All right, so we see Mark Rabin's going to be kind of jumping in and out because he's mobile today. All right. All right. All right, so we see Robbie Bowling is checking in from Dallas. He just got home from his doctor's appointment. We hope that I think you mentioned that you might have glaucoma, so we hope that's going okay for you, Robbie, and thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. When playing a loop in Groove Agent, it starts playback from the end of the loop. All right, so let's give it a shot here. Okay, and I'll drag a drum loop over. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this to an instrument pad. So now when I play, it's automatically going to play. So let's just say, of course, I picked the longest loop of all time. So let's say. So I drag this over. We'll go ahead and just kind of zoom in. So when I play the loop here, it's just going to play back. Now, there's some different playback options that you can get when you get a sample. So we could have this be kind of a one shot. We could have it be no loop. So if I just wanted to, and if I have it do one shot, it'll just kind of play. Like I just click and it's going to play until. Now, if I want it to be continuous, it'll just kind of keep playing. So let's say now if I hit it under continuous, it will just kind of keep playing. And then you could also do until release, but it just seems like everything is kind of playing. And we could also do alternate until release. So when it gets to the end, I think it'll just kind of play backwards if memory serves. Let's see what it does at the end of the loop here. Yeah. So, but check just the sample. But it looks like it's automatically like the loop is just playing back. And I just hit it multiple times. So, but it looks like it's always starting from the beginning of the sample as you do it. So let me know if I'm, if it's an audio loop or a MIDI loop that's kind of going on. That would be helpful. All right. So we have, I think it's Gamera 21 checking in from Berlin. Thanks for joining us on the live stream today. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Howling Sonic always accompanies my stylus when I drag and drop in my project. How can I disable the auto loading of Howling Sonic? So this is going to be a preference because apparently it seems like your stylus is just dragging and dropping MIDI files in. So if we want it to stop that, you go to your preferences and under MIDI file, which is under MIDI, you could just say under destination, you could just say, instrument tracks or MIDI tracks. But if you choose Howling in Sonic SE, that would automatically load up in an instance of Howling in Sonic. And the intention is if you have like a MIDI file that's also general MIDI, that will play back. So you could just change the value here in destination under preferences, MIDI to MIDI file. All right, great to see Jeff Zabelski joining us from Chico, California. Okay, we have a question. Is there a way to load Cubase 11 with just a specific number of plugins, despite however many are installed? Bit of a long shot, I know. So if you want to only have access to a limited number of plugins, you could come to your VST plugin manager. You could create, and you could do this for VST effects or VST instruments. Click on the little plus sign here, and we could make a new collection. So we'll say, okay, we're going to call this empty. So we'll just say this will be Quaver Love Studio. And I only want to see one compressor. I only want to see an auto panner. I only want to see my frequency EQ. And let's say imager. And those are only plugins I want Cubase to access. So now when I come over here to look at a particular plugin, I go to my inserts, those are the only choices that are there. Now, if I wanted to just kind of change and say, okay, I want it to load up a different collection of plugins, I could now just go back and see all of my plugins that are available. But if you wanted to specifically limit what options you see, or you did the classic Black Friday, about 100 plugins for $20, and I used 3 of the 100, now you don't have to sit there and see the 97 plugins that you don't want. Okay, so we have a question from Oren Bynum. I hope you're doing well, Oren. It says, I was using Soul Assembly yesterday and couldn't get the sound to play in Cubase 11, but I could hear other instruments in Media Bay playing. What am I doing wrong? So, the Soul Assembly, if you're going to look at it, the Soul Assembly is going to be just a series of loops. So when we come over here, let's say I want to go to my loops and samples, and now I want to go to my Soul Assembly, and I just wanted maybe, different sections. Or, so, and as we do this, I have this just going through, so we could audition your different audio, all the different sample loops directly there. And to do that, you want to make sure that when you go to your audio connections that you have the control room set up, and because this isn't on a particular track, so as we go to preview, since it's not, it doesn't have a home yet in our tracks, and the track that's being sent to the mixer with the mixer routing, it goes through the control room to audition. So make sure that you may want to have the outputs here defined, like a stereo output. And when you go to the control room, add a monitor and set the monitor to where it's actually being sent to. And then you should be able to just audition. But it's going to be an audio loop and not a sound that you can play per se. So, you could take it into right click and, turn it into the sampler track and be able to play, that way, but it's not like a preset for an instrument, because they're going to be, predominantly audio loops. So give that a try, Oren. Let us know. All right, so we see from Thermonuclear War, still in Cubase 5, 11 is like spaceship. So yeah, there's, several hundred features probably added for each version. So you go 5 to 5.5, 6, 6.5, it's, all the way up to 11. It gets to be, a tremendous amount of new functionality, but, pretty much most things that work in 5 would work, very similar. You just have more capabilities in later versions. So. Okay, my chat room jumped on me. All right, so I think I'm back. All right. Yeah, so I just see a comment. So it says, also a guy has his YouTube channel. I think this is the one I was thinking of. Is the One Man and His Songs about the Halion tutorials. So, definitely check that out. So that's one I thought was really good. Okay, so question from Oren. How can I analyze the chords I'm playing to find out what key I'm playing in? So if you wanted to just kind of start off, let's say if I have a chord track here. Okay, so I'm just click right over here. Let's add a chord track. Okay, and I will just kind of, let's say I know that I have a couple of different chords, so I will come over here, say, okay, let's make it, I will go to the, I could have MIDI input turned on. So now when I just kind of play a chord, I'll just kind of add a couple of chords just so it can. So now that I've just kind of populated some of the chords, so you can hit the plus sign and just kind of play your chord. And then just as you hit it on a keyboard, so now you could, come right over here, and within the chord track, you could see that Cubase will tell you, okay, looks like Greg is playing in F major. So this way it could tell you, so just, create empty chords. And as you double click here, you could just activate MIDI input and then just kind of play some chords and give it some data to work with. And Cubase will, do its best to figure out what key you intend to be in right there. All right, wonderful to see Nick on the live stream. Okay. All right, so we have another question from Kaladin Ultima. I wrote a drum part, Superior Drummer, kick is on C1, but in a score editor, it is 3 or more octaves below. So generally when we have this, so, the MIDI, note assignments, to what is notated is often going to be very different. So let's say if I wanted to come, I'll just add an instrument track here. Let's add a groove agent, and I'll just do. Okay, so let's say now I want to take this pattern and we drag over a pattern to the groove agent. Now, when I do this, you may have to kind of play with the drum map. With groove agent, we have this automatically create the drum map from the instrument. But you could also come over here and go to the drum map setup. So often when we look at, like our kick drum is on C1, but we may want the display note to be on like F3. And let's say our snare, we want it to be on, was it C4? And then you could choose different note head shapes here. So say, okay, whatever you want it to be. So that now you could have a correlation between, like when you go to notate your drums, so you can see my kick and snare here will be kind of, mapped, and I could change the hi-hats. But if I just wanted to do that, so go to the drum map setup, because the notated pitch versus what general MIDI note is triggering the sample aren't related. So they're completely disassociated from each other. So again, go to your drum map setup, and here you'll see just the display note. And you could change the display note to automatically correlate to where you want it to see on the actual event. So give that a shot. And so you should be able to take, the notes that are without having to change the MIDI sound that they're triggering, and have it play the correct MIDI note assignment in the instrument and have it display independently in the score editor. Okay, so we see Michael Teams needed the punch in, punch out information. All right. All right, so we see Michael Pierce has just kind of popped in, and we'll be back. So thanks for joining us, Michael. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to use pitch bend wheel in my keyboard to control volume, panning, or others in automation without affecting the pitch? Okay, so let's say if I wanted to add we'll just add a quick instance of retrolog. Okay, so now if I go to my pitch bend wheel, okay, so what I want to do is to maybe transform the pitch bend into other MIDI CC messages. So I'm going to go to the input transformer, and I'm going to set it to local. You could also do it globally if you want this. We're going to activate a module. And we're under function, we're going to choose transform. So what I want to do is we're going to say type is equal to pitch bend. And we want to take value 1 and let's set it to, we're going to set type and we're going to set it to controller. And let's say if I want value 1 of that controller, we're going to set it to a fixed value of, let's say, 7. And so now when I come over here, I'll go to my MIDI insert and let's just open up a MIDI monitor. Okay, so I move my pitch bend wheel. I'll deactivate this. So I move my pitch bend wheel, we see pitch bend information. I'm going to activate this again. And now we see that my pitch bend is turning into CC7, or if I want it to be, controller 11. So now as I move my pitch bend, it's now transforming the pitch bend message into whatever MIDI CC that I want to type here. So now it's going to do my pitch bend is my modulation. So once again, go to this little squiggly line on the tracks and we can make this global or local for a particular track. So I just made it local here. And we want under function to choose transform. And I want to do type is equal to pitch bend. Okay, so this is saying we're going to take our pitch bend information and what do we want to do with the pitch bend information? So I want to take the pitch bend information and transform it into MIDI controllers. So we'll say type set. We'll say type is set to MIDI controllers, and then value 1 we want to set to fixed value and just choose your controller that you want it to turn it into, and that's all you kind of have to get set up. All right, so I just see from Jeff Zabelski, hi Greg, can't finish 50 gigabyte download from download assistant after its update, 12 gigabyte download, then error, try again later. Also, it's not at the support slash download slash software Iconica, not available. Please help, I want it. So if you want to send me an email, Michael, so, generally, as you're doing it, let's go to the download manager here. Or the download assistant. Okay, so let's say if I come over here to the VST instruments and down to Iconica. I think it was maybe the ensembles that you got. So, just out of curiosity, if you have another drive that you could, when you go to the settings here, and maybe if you set it to a different drive location to see if that makes a difference for you. And if, worst case scenario, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I may be able to find some other download site for it, or maybe create something temporarily for you. So just, try switching the default location and make sure that maybe it's not getting too full. I know you have a brand new computer, but see if you could, perhaps download it to a different area or to a different location and see if that makes a difference. But once again, feel free to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible for Cubase to write synthesizer information about MIDI arrangements more reliably? When I write MIDI information from a synthesizer, all tracks write all parts. So I'm not sure when you say write synthesizer information, if you're using a synthesizer and, if you have multiple tracks kind of armed, Cubase will transmit, the MIDI data from your synthesizer. It could be, filters or MIDI CCs or sysx that could write it to all of the, all of the tracks that are record enabled. So make sure that you don't, if you only want that data, and I'm not sure what exactly the synthesizer information is, if that's, filters and envelopes and stuff like that, make sure that you don't have other tracks inadvertently record enabled. And then, but if you wanted to, you could choose to take it out of in all MIDI inputs. So if you wanted to only have that one particular track, you could say, okay, this is coming from my synthesizer. I don't want that to be in all MIDI inputs, and on this track, I want to set the particular input manually. So you give that a try, but let us know, when you say synthesizer information, but if you're transmitting MIDI, and you have multiple tracks in record, they will all record because you told Cubase to do that. So, but if you could maybe clarify, that would be helpful. All right, so we have Weez on Music checking in from Orlando. Thanks for joining us. All right, just reading through comments. So lots of ice cream discussion again. So. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I fix pops and glitches while playback? Thanks. So many times, pops and glitches on playback could be the result of the buffer of your audio interface being low. So if we go to your studio menu to studio setup, we can now select the audio interface and often click on control panel and try just to increase the buffer size. And it may be, it could be expressed in kind of different terminology. And we could think of the buffer as being, like as it's transmitting all of the information. The lower the buffer, the more responsive and, and faster, like the transport, and the faster any monitoring latency would be. But it also makes the computer work really hard. If we were to think of a conveyor belt, we're trying to send all the same information in packets of, 32 at a time, or do you want to collect up to 256 bits of information and get that kind of all sorted and send that down? So if we kind of think of it like kind of a conveyor belt, like 32 could be, say twice, 4 times, could almost be, 8 times more work on a computer to send the same amount of data as a buffer of 256. So I would try to raise the buffer size. And when you're doing that, if you've raised the buffer size high and it's still problematic, it could be that certain plugins are just, causing your CPU, hit F12 and, check out your plugin information. Let me see if I see my Apple is overtaking my function keys again. But if you go to, while you're doing this, also check your audio performance and see where your audio performance is. And this may adjust accordingly as you adjust the buffers. But, most of the time when I get that question, it's going to be just, it's going to be just kind of raising the buffer, and that can make a big difference. Okay. Let me just make an adjustment here in my audio interface. Give me a second. All right, so I just see a question. How can we seamlessly go between Cunard to desktop audio without audio driver needing to be defaulted to local? In other words, they will share the same audio source. So generally, what you need to do, and you may have to do this in several different areas, but for Cubase to release a driver is go to your studio menu to studio setup, click on audio system, and then choose release driver when application is in background. So now when you do that, you go to your web browser, play something on YouTube, while doing research on a Club Cubase live stream, you could hear that and then go back to Cubase, and that way, Cubase will release the driver. Some audio interfaces I've seen where you have to, continually, you have to do this at the, operating system level for the driver as well. But, most of the time this will take care of it. So once again, your studio menu to studio setup to audio system to release driver when application is in background. Okay, so we see Space Crawlers mentioning, today just figured out I did not install all the optional sound stuff included with Cubase 11 Pro. That Steinberg download assistant media manager is, how should I say, suboptimal. So yeah, if you have licenses and you paid for all the content, you might as well download it and use it. So, and this probably a follow-up question to the plugin manager question. Says thanks, Greg. Does that mean they all still load and I can only limit what I see? So yeah, it does limit what you can see, but their programs will be loading. But you could choose to go in and manually move them from folders if you wanted to. So there's going to be kind of a common VST3 plugin folder. And there's, VST2 plugin folders as well. Those could be anywhere on your computer's hard disk. So if they're not in the folders where Cubase is looking for it, then those plugins won't load in the background and they won't be visible without having to go into the VST plugin manager. Okay. Chat field just jumped on me. Sorry to find my space where I was. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Tommy, can you rearrange the order from top to bottom of how VST collections are displayed, or is it only from date created, top oldest, bottom latest? Okay, so I'm not sure if we could just kind of change the order of it. We'll take a quick look. Yeah, so I don't think that there's a way to change the order, from top to bottom, of, the different plugin collections, but I'll mention that and pass it along. All right, so we have Christophe checking in from Colmar, France. Thanks for joining us. And once again, if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay. Hey, Greg, I just bought Cubase. I'm wondering, is there a way to not get audio events overlapping as a default setting, or do I have to do that manually every time? So I think if you just go to your preferences and under editing, you could just choose delete overlaps, and that will kind of stick between different projects. So once again, try going to editing, and just checking delete overlaps there. And now as you have different audio events, that would be overlapping, that just deletes it for you automatically. So if I wanted to come here, so you could just see that that's working. And once I disable that, I can now just have those events that will overlap. And welcome to Cubase 11, Jonas. We hope to see you more live streams. Okay, so we have a question. Can I reactivate the trial? So generally the trial version is limited, because, we are, in, business to create new products, and, that takes financial resources to do. So we don't want someone to be, running the trial version continuously. So that's why I give you, I think, a 30-day trial window. So I don't know a way to reactivate the trial version again. All right, so we have Christian D68 joining us, saying hi. So thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, so we have today my PC, just a question from Christian D68. My PC made a Windows update. I'm canceling it since it's weeks, but today Bill Gates was quicker than me. Problem is that Cubase doesn't work at all. So try just to, I don't think Bill Gates has been with the company for a while at Microsoft, but I would try, often, what you have to do. And if you get into situations like that is just, you could go to, it's probably just the eLicenser that needs to be updated. So I would go to elicenser.net, and just reinstall the latest eLicenser version. And I think that will probably take care of you. Okay, so just see, how can I change language of interfaces? So if you want to change the, the localization of Cubase for the languages, you could go to preferences and under general. And here you could choose, between German, English, Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese, Portuguese, Russian, or Chinese. So those are different languages that Cubase is localized in. So once again, preferences and under general, and then you'll see language. All right, just reading through different comments. Okay, so we see, thanks for the drum map idea. Will this translate to Dorico Pro? So it's not the same exact technology, but Dorico has something kind of very similar, but it's not the same exact drum map setup. So, but conceptually, it's the same. See, interesting comment from Gareth. It says Greg makes Retrolog sound like my brain. So not sure if that's good or bad. So and Gareth is promising to learn the Project Logical editor before the 22nd century. So you have to hurry up. You can't procrastinate. Okay, so we see Space Crawlers just saying that's great, Greg, this MIDI transform method. So yeah, it comes in handy for a lot of different things. Okay, Gareth wants people to not forget to rearrange the like thingy. Okay, reading through comments, lots of great discussion. It probably happened 30 minutes ago. Feel like I have latency, like I'm going to Mars or something. All right, just... Okay, reading through more comments. Okay, it was just on a question. My chat field jumped on me, so... Okay, I'm trying to find my spot. Sorry about that. I see that Jeff's tried in our drive as well. Okay, I think I'm close to where I was. Okay, so we got a question. Hello, Greg. Could I assign horizontal scrolling and zooming in Cubase elements to my rotary knobs and my Akai MPD 218 CC commands? So let's go ahead and let me just kind of get it set up. So I think, I'm not sure if this is in Cubase Elements, but you might be able to set it up as a, if you click here on devices where you can see a generic remote. So let's say now I can say I want it, this MIDI CC message, and I wanted this to go to command, and it's probably going to be zoom. So now when I come here, you can say, okay, I just want to take this track. And so now I could have that MIDI CC. So if it's going to be done where you could do it through MIDI CC, try going again to your studio setup and go to a generic remote. And then you could just say you wanted to zoom out vertically. So you could have this particular MIDI controller, and then you could just have your knob and apply that. And now you could just kind of, move a knob and have it zoom. So different knobs could do different zoom functions. So C, once again, if you go to the studio setup, you may have to click on the plus sign and just add a generic remote, tell what MIDI message. And if you don't know what MIDI message it is, click on learn, move the knob, it'll be captured. And then go to command, and then under channel category, go to zoom, and then you could set up the different zoom functions there. So I just see a question from Gareth. Any info about how Cubase uses DirectX, and if it uses DirectX 12, it would be great. So I don't think that DirectX has been kind of a viable plugin format. I think it was dropped in Cubase 4. So it may be. So I don't know any company that's developed DirectX plugins in years. But so I don't think it offers any advantages over VST plugins. So, but it's been dropped for a long time. It's kind of abandoned by Microsoft, I think, going into, going into Windows 7 or maybe even XP. It was kind of done away with. So just see, hi Greg, do you know if there's a way to get hold of the IC Pro Air that used to be an add-on app for Cubase 7 for the Leap motion controller? So I used to have the Leap motion controller. Let me just see. I'll just see. I haven't played with it in a long time. So it looks like it might, it may say for Cubase 7, but, this looks like, I just did a quick search, so it may say for Cubase 7. I'm not sure if, so this might be for later versions. It might have just been introduced with Cubase 7. So you could give that a try. I could see if I could dig mine up. I may have it. I don't even know where the Leap motion controller is anymore. May have it in a box in storage. but I could see if I get it to work if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But it looks like it's still on the website. All right, wonderful to see Chase Bethia on our live stream. All right, so a question I noticed in the download assistant lists all the content for Cubase 11 Pro updates. If I select install all, will it update, overwrite the existing content, or does it create a new content item? So it won't create a new content item, so it won't duplicate. So it may just automatically see that you have that version installed, and it may not download it and then install it. So. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, does anyone have the same problem as me since version 11.02? The transport bar returns to the start instead of returning to the start instead of returning to its starting position. So there was, behavior that had changed, like long time behavior. So when we came and when we hit, if I was starting at measure 9 and I hit stop, I hit play, then I hit stop twice, since Cubase has been around, that would automatically jump back to kind of the starting position. So that behavior changed. One other thing to be aware of in this, if you're using the space bar, is that there's an actual preference. If you go to transport, and you could say return to start position on stop. So now if you're using the space bar, when I hit stop, we can just go directly to the start position. And if that is disabled, it'll just, when I hit the space bar, it'll just kind of continue. Make sure I have that preference disabled. So that's another preference to, so for years and years, when you hit the actual stop button here, when you hit it twice, it would take you back to the start, back to the start position instead of stopping it or kind of pausing. And then that went away. So people didn't like the behavior. So it was returned in 11.02. Okay, so question, is there a way to assign the mouse wheel to do zoom in and zoom out on the slides rather than have the left mouse button dragging to perform that task? So if we have a project, and let me activate the project here, we have lots of pretty waveforms. So, if I just wanted to hold down control or command, we could zoom horizontally just by using the mouse scroll wheel. So let me know if that helps you. So it doesn't do vertically, but it will do horizontally. So it's just like really handy if you're doing editing, and you can just kind of zoom in, right on a particular area just for simplified editing. So try holding down Command on Mac or Control on Windows. Just a comment from Space Crawler. Just a thought. I would like to see scalable windows and all to get an easier usability with touchscreens. So, it's, I think, within Cubase, there's, probably tens of thousands of windows. So, I think that they're working on, it's a big undertaking. We see every version significant, older Windows being updated for, high DPI as well as different scalability. Okay, question. Can you demonstrate how to change tempo or time signatures in a project? Okay, so I'll just do new project. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to add a signature track and a tempo track. So now that I've done this, all right, so I could choose to, have tempo changes. Okay, right here, I want this as a tempo change. I want a different tempo change at this point. So now we have our tempo changes. And once I'm on a signature track, I could just come right here and say, okay, I want it to be 4/4. I want to click here. I want it to be 5/4 to 3/4 back to 4/4. And then you could just, have Cubase follow the activate the metronome or just follow the actual tempo. And that's, once you activate the tempo, then it's going to automatically just play back those time signature and tempo changes. Okay, so just see question. Hello, Greg. Can I set a default gain on VST instruments? Every time I open one, it's not too loud. So, it's going to be set at 0 dB by default. Generally, that isn't too loud for, so I'm not sure if there's other things in the gain structure that's maybe causing that, but it's not adding gain. So, maybe there's something else in how the gain structure for the project is set up that makes that seem really loud. But I've had to request before from people, and I'll pass it along again. Okay, so just see from William Baker, FYI, Houston controller seems to be working just fine since 11.1. So yeah, I still have my Houston. I know many of my friends still do too. So I kind of fought to get the Houston controller, so for that support to be added back in. So. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, how to just convert a mono track to 2 stereo to identical channels. Okay. All right, so let's say I want to take this bass part here, so I'm going to duplicate the bass. So I'll just take this mono track, and if you want it to be the same, I'm not sure if there's a huge benefit of this, but I'm just going to right click and let's duplicate the track. I'll make it active first. That would help. Then I get some functionality. So say duplicate the track. And if you wanted to pan accordingly or not. So then I can come right over here, go to your project, and we'll choose to convert tracks, and we'll say mono to multi-channel. I want this to go out to stereo, hit OK. And now it's a stereo file for you. So that's how you could take a mono track and just have that converted to stereo. All right, so we have a question. Any chance of having a live stream specific to Nuendo 11? So, we gladly answer Nuendo questions, Wavelab questions, other Steinberg questions here. I think that the Steinberg guys, since I'm doing 8 hours of live streams, I think, I know there's some discussion of someone else doing some of the Nuendo specific live streams. Like we have Mike Scheibinger doing them for spectral layers, and Justin Perkins is doing them for Wave Lab. So, there's different voices doing it. It's not just me talking too much. So, but if you have a specific Nuendo question, send it in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or just simply, ask in the chat field. And okay, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me find my spot. Okay, so question, reverb on sends or CPU intensive processes? 1, I am lucky to have UAD DSP plugins. Are these reverbs less demanding than native? 2, which Cubase stock reverb is the best for CPU? It could really depend. So sometimes, it takes processing power to run the processor for the UAD plugin. So, so I think if you ran a bunch of UAD plugins, and I haven't run them in a long time, that your computer, you'll see that your, Cubase performance meter will increase to more. So while it's being powered, it's by the processes, by the processors, the DSP chips. It's still going to, I believe, and I haven't worked with this in, since like the first PCI versions. But, I think it's still going to take some CPU that, if you run everything on UAD plugins, your CPU, your performance meter would indicate, more of those plugins running. So, it's better to run reverbs on send so that they're not demanding. So, I think, you would have to try out the different scenarios to see which one is less demanding. I know that basically, in my discussions with guys from UAD, they're all written as native VST plugins and then just kind of run, on the actual, DSP processor. Okay, so and there's another question: which Cubase stock reverb is the best for CPU? There's different ones. So as we look at different effects channel tracks, if you want, many people will use the Revelation. So if you wanted to come here as a algorithmic reverb, and that's not terribly intense, but depending on your application. And then one that may be a little more intense is going to be a convolution reverb, and that would be something like Reverence. So if I wanted to add an effects channel track, and we'll take a look at Reverence, if you wanted one that was very minimal on CPU, you could go to like some of the older ones that still sound really good. Check out one has maybe a limited set of controls, but you could check out something like the Roomworks, and you could have different presets there, and that could be minimal on CPU as well. Okay, so we have a question. I'll just revert this while I read the question. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button, and that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. Okay, so the question is, I'm on Cubase 9.5 and I'm having a weird problem with recording audio when I record my VSTI. It says, I think the sync is great in the first loop round, but when it loops around, it loses sync about 500 or so samples forward, then stays out of sync by that amount in the next loop. Let me see if that's it. So sometimes you have to be like, some devices when they're syncing to MIDI clock don't react well to, they kind of they can react well when the system is continuously playing, but sometimes when it loops back. And as you do this, when you loop back, one thing that I would check that I've seen kind of, old days of, locking many many instruments to MIDI clock and having that. But when you do this, make sure that sometimes it could be a little forgiving if we have, let me just add a quick MIDI track. Okay. Okay, so let's say we have a MIDI track here. So make sure that, what you're actually synchronizing, this could be just like a little thing that could throw off different scenarios like you're describing. So let's say we have, our little motif or melodic figure here. But let's say this one is just ever so slightly, out of time. So like when we look at it, it's going to be not, perfectly locked. So I'll just take my snap off here quickly. So when you go in and you zoom in, make sure that that very first note is on time and starting right on a beat, and it's not starting earlier or a little behind the beat. And also make sure that when you're doing the loop, that maybe, check the ends as well. So you don't want something that's, maybe looping a little early or late. And also just kind of make sure that the loop points are snapping to the bar and beat. So little things are being timed off. Like if the first note is a little bit late on the, on the chase, especially if you have like arpeggiators and stuff like that, that could cause it to kind of drift out of time. And when you use USB drivers, technically it could be faster, but, there's a lot of sloppiness in different USB MIDI drivers as well to be, so if you have the capability of checking it with a, with another MIDI interface, you could do that as well, just as a control. All right, just reading through comments. Apparently I'm live from Perseverance Station on Mars. All right. Okay, so see a repeat question. All right, so. Okay, so we have a question from Sable. I still have Cubase 8 and 9.5 installed. What will happen if I uninstall them after 11? Nervous. Well, there's nothing really to be nervous about, but the actual programs take kind of, they're not terribly big. What is big is like all of the content, and probably as you've upgraded from 8 to 9.5 to 11, that content has just basically expanded over time. So you could, if you have kind of like your key commands and user settings all working in 11, you're not there's nothing that will be bad uninstalling 8 and 9.5, but it may not give you a lot of disk space, or if you just wanted to get it off your system, you could do that. So no worries, and you could always reinstall. So. Okay, so I see a clarification from Gareth. Sorry, Greg, I meant DirectX as GUI for Cubase, not the old plugin Cubase. Sorry. Yeah, I haven't heard of any plans. If there's actual benefit to sometimes as new display driver technology comes out for designed to aid computer gamers, it kind of has unwanted effects on actual on actual performance for audio applications. But I'll ask to see if there's any movement towards that in my next discussions. Okay, reading through all different discussions. All right. All right, so we have Graham checking in from such a UK sounding place, Royal Wootton Bassett in Wiltshire in the UK. It says, I've learned so much from your fantastic knowledge of the best DAW in the world. So thanks for joining us. And wonderful to see you on the live stream. Okay, so we see Millard Brown is happy. He says today's revelation returned to start works again. So okay, so we have a question from Paul Claridge. Good to see you on the live stream. I'm having a hard time understanding how to utilize the save as new version feature. I tried it, did not function as expected. Can you explain its intended use? Okay, so let's say I want to, come over here and save as a new version. So I have everything set up here as my Hit the Road Geo as my song. So I added a MIDI track. So what I want to do is to save as a new version. So that's going to leave. So right now it's saved it incrementally to Hit the Road G001. So when I go to look at my projects, so let's come over here to Documents, Projects, and I'll just choose Hit the Road. So we'll see Hit the Road Geo, and then today Hit the Road Go, and then we see 01 from today. So that was from March 6th. This was from today. So that just saved a new version without, being able, so without overwriting this version. So it just has created a separate document. So if I always wanted to go back to my original, I don't have to come up with any naming schemes. It just automatically differentiates the name so that's a complete, separate, and independent project file from the original one. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Paul. Okay, sorry, my chat field's jumping a lot today. Okay, so just see from Matthias in Hamburg. Hi, I'm wondering why the download manager shows all available components. I bought with Cubase 11 Pro as can be installed, which I when I do install them again, it turns green and looks okay. Just see if there's a follow up. So yeah, let me know. I mean, if so, it's kind of showing you everything that can be installed. So the reason why it was kind of broken up initially is like, we would often deal with colleges or people that lived in places that had bad internet access, and for them to download like what Jeff is going through right now, a 50 gigabyte file without anything being messed up, at that point could be tricky. So that's why it was kind of broken down to different elements. So okay, so to see from John Costigan, it says, I'm a little gun shy on reinstalling my Apollo Twin interface since I've had so much weirdness with Cubase 10 5.3 with Windows 10. Any sage advice? So try it again, and just if you want to send me an email, if you're having issues, send me an email, and if need be, I could take I don't mind taking a quick look remotely at your system. So just let me know when you get it all installed. Maybe it'll just magically work when you get it back. So, but I think it's got to be something pretty simple. So we have a question. Hello, Greg. I was wondering if it is okay to mix instrument tracks with MIDI tracks, kind of like the rack. It seems to work similarly. Any thoughts on doing things this way? So, over time, I would. Okay. So over time, I used to do all MIDI tracks routed to instrument racks. Because I would sometimes, I would do like a lot of work with multiple instances, multiple instruments loaded into different MIDI channels in Hallian. So I would have like one instrument that I could simply go back and forth and, edit all the sounds while having one instrument interface open and being able to navigate instead of doing multiple things. So, and so I think it could depend on the instrument, but I've mostly migrated over to, to instrument tracks, but you could run a hybrid of either. So it used to be that there was more significant differences between an instrument rack and an instrument track. In the early days, instrument tracks were limited to just being stereo and not being multi-timbral, so one MIDI channel. A lot of those restrictions are no longer. So, you could definitely do a hybrid, and I think most people are transitioning over to instrument tracks, especially when you get into some of the different options for render in place. They could work a little more fluidly. Okay, so we have a question from Oren. Greg, will you duplicate a piano track 5 times but change the sounds of the other tracks to include different instrument like strings, organ, etc., please? Okay. I'll just create a new project for Oren. Hope you're doing well. Okay, so I'll just start with the Hallian Sonic SE. All right, so say I'll just have a little piano part here. So it's All right, I'm the worst keyboard player in the world. So okay, so I have that, and we listen to it now. Okay, so let me go ahead and duplicate this. All right, and on this one, I'm going to open it up and go through sounds. All right, so let's say I want strings. Okay, so now we'll have this instrument playing back piano and strings. And let's do an organ. So open up this instrument instead of doing the strings. Right, so now I'll have a little pipe organ action going on. So that's kind of really all you had to do to kind of get that set up. So you can just kind of duplicate and name accordingly. All right, so just see Gareth is telling me it's impossible for me to talk too much. So I get tired of hearing my voice on the live stream. So that's why I like doing the Zoom meetups. So I get to hear other people talk and meet everyone. Okay. All right. So we have from Kerwin Young. So it's wonderful to see you on the live stream. It says, I can never thank you enough for presenting these much needed webinars. Question: can I use the Project Logical Editor for renumbering assigned markers? I don't think so, but let's give it a shot. All right. So let's say. So let's say I have this and I wanted to now I have marker 1. It's probably something like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I go in between markers 1 and 2, put a new marker, and that's going to be marker 6. Okay. So if I come here. So let's see if I just click on under functions to reassign position marker IDs. So if we do that, that will automatically just change it to now be kind of in time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So maybe if you wanted to do that, you could try to reassign position marker IDs. So if I put in, let's say, marker 789 here. So this is 1, 789, 2. Maybe under the functions, just to reassign the position markers, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's see if that's addressable maybe through a keyboard shortcut. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it's available via a keyboard shortcut, but let me know, Kerwin, if that's kind of what you want to do, to just have those kind of go in number. So once again, once you go to the marker, come right over here and go to functions and click on the reassign position marker IDs, and that will kind of make it in order as they appear in following the timeline. So let me know if that works for you, Kerwin. Okay, so we see Tony Glasgow says, "Do you guys work?" Just kidding, but I see most of the same people in the Hangouts. I put mine on at work and listen in and out in case something catches my attention. So depending where you are, like we start. I think if you're in Central Europe, like Germany or France, Spain, I think it's at 7 o'clock. In the UK, it's 6 o'clock. We start at 10 a.m. on the West Coast. So so there's a lot of people. Maybe depending where they are. It's after work for them. So, okay, so we have a question from USA Edits. How can I use select an area in the main project area and find out how many samples and also how many milliseconds are contained in the selection? Okay, so let's say if I have a range selection here, like, I wanted to find out, I'll just do it on one of our projects here. So let's say I wanted to find out exactly how many samples or milliseconds the event is. So I could select the amount of time with my range tool. So once I select that amount of time, so let's say I'll just go beyond. So I want that. We could see this range length. So depending upon what your master time format is, we can see that we went from 62, beat 4, 4th, 16th note to measure 65, beat 3. So it's 2.201 range length. So we see this indicated in the info line. Now, if I switch my master time to seconds, we can see that this is 3.636 milliseconds. And if I switch my master time to samples, we can see that this will be 174,549 samples. So whatever you have selected, you can see this range, and the time format will be indicated by whatever the master time format is. Then that range will, so that's how you could figure out exactly what the range is in milliseconds, times, beats, or SMPTE time code in various frame rates. All right, so we have Danielle saying ciao from Italy. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, so we have a question. Why are the colors of the events different from the track ones? Sometimes, people like to have that. So let's say I know some people will just come over here, select a range. They want their vocals to be this, but let's say they split. Say if they just come here and split this, they may want to take all of these events, like when they're in the chorus, so they know exactly when the chorus is coming in a very Homer Simpson obvious manner. So the chorus could be a completely different colors within. So the events within the tracks themselves can be independent of colors, or you could change colors. So if you want the bridge to be green, the chorus is to be purple, whatever you want. So All right, so we see Kevin Walker on, says once upon a time Steinberg produced a MIDI interface. So yeah, I still have two MIDX8s in my rack. I use them all the time with my Windows 10 system. Okay, so a question from Danielle. The only way to add a pre-master fader is create a group track. That's one way of doing it. But another method that you could use also is just a VCA. So let's say if I have a number of tracks here, I could select all the tracks. If I wanted to create a group, I could do that, but I could also just add or I'll just right click and I'm going to just add VCA fader to the selected channel. So now as I come here, I could adjust this without affecting any of the gain structure. So that's another method without adding a group. But the most common way is probably a group or VCA fader. And that could give you like a pre-master fader. Okay, so we have a question from Nairobi, Kenya, from Mark. Is there a way of adding multiple tracks that auto increment the input channel number? Okay. So let's say if I have multiple inputs here. So let's say I have, go to my inputs and I wanted to add, let's say I have 16 mono inputs. Okay, so let me click here. I want to add audio track and let's make them mono. And I wanted to add, let's say 16. All right, so let's look at our inputs. Okay, so if I wanted to increment these, I'm gonna come over here, select the top one, and I'm gonna say mono in 1 while holding down the shift key. I think this will do it for us. So now we could have mono in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and that will automatically increment. So they're not added necessarily with the input, but you could select all the channels and hold down the shift key and select the top one that you want, and then it will increment the input channels from there. Okay, so we just see from Tanmay, what's the Thunderbolt icon? I'm using the Mini Lab Mark II on Serum and Contact. So if I wanted to come here, so I wasn't able to, and thanks for sending that again, Tammy. I know we had some discussion on this, but let's say, I'll just add a couple of instrument tracks here. So let's add a retro log and maybe a pad chop. So these are all different. Okay. So when I go to look at my, and let me just add some parts. So I go to, let's say, my retro log track, and we go to note expression. So I don't have, and I saw the little like lightning bolt icon that you had enabled here, but mine doesn't have that. So, that's why I was just wondering if you were So I'm not sure if Serum or Contact, Contact, I don't think definitely would be able to do the note expression data. But so I don't think Serum can either. So I'm not sure, so I don't know if Serum is a VST 3.5 instrument where you could, where it can respond to note expression data. But I saw in your screenshot that you had the little, note here, but let me just try maybe an older VST instrument and see. So let's try like Mystic and see if this has a different behavior. So, but I can't necessarily get that out. So that's why I was wondering, this note expression information isn't going to work, because Serum, unless it's a VST 3.5 instrument, I don't have a license, but I'm pretty sure Contact is still VST 2. It's not going to respond to any of this. So maybe that's why it's kind of giving you that message. But I don't have the little, Thunderbolt icon here like you do in your system. So. All right. So we have Matsu Ikata from France joining us. All right, and Gareth likes how I pronounce Wilton Bassett. So I'm just an insecure American who thinks I mispronounce every English word improperly for people from England. So. Okay, so it says I can't even active a MPK controller. So, as long as the controller is, if the drivers for the controller are installed on the system, anything that the operating system it's installed in the operating system is available to Cubase. And if you wanted to just check to make sure it's installed in your operating system, but if you go to your studio setup, you could also go to your MIDI port setup and make sure that you see the MPK listed here. If you don't see it listed here, you may have to install drivers. It may not be like a plug and play class compliant type of device, because you may need to have, to define what the knobs are, what messages they're transmitting and whatnot. So, okay, wonderful to see Walter Blackledge from St. Louis Club Cubase. Okay, so we have a question. Can you export stems? So MIDI export, and so MIDI exports is MIDI and audio exports is audio. Also, how do you export stems in Cubase Artist? So, I think in Cubase Pro, you're going to see more extensive stem creation capability. If, these stems are going to be, when we do our export audio mix down, the stems will create audio files from MIDI, and the audio will turn, so it's going to create audio from the MIDI and the audio itself. If you wanted to take the MIDI and export that, you would just go to the export MIDI file function, and that would export the MIDI as a separate MIDI file. So, but in Cubase Artist, you might have to, solo the different tracks and be able to make stems and do multiple exports, because I don't think it has kind of the job queues function that the Cubase Pro does. So how it works in Cubase Pro is you could choose between single and multiple. So in Cubase Artist, you may have to choose single and say, okay, I wanted to take, mute the tracks that you don't want to have and say, okay, these will be all my strings. Export, and after export, choose create audio track, and then go through and do each of those. With Cubase Pro, you have the capability of selecting multiple and saying, I want all of my instrument tracks, all my audio tracks, all my group, all my effects, and that will make the stems for me automatically once I add it to the job queue. So, there is some pretty significant differences between Cubase Pro and Cubase Artist in that function. So in Artist, you may have to just solo the parts, export it, and import it back into the project and kind of manually do the stems, whereas Pro, it's kind of automated for you. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, so I just see I've had some crashes using Spectral Layer 7 in standalone, but no issues using it in Cubase. So make sure, I think it's on 7.03 that you had like the latest version of that, because they are pretty actively, since version 7 came out right around shortly before Cubase Pro 11, maybe October-ish, there have been, 3 or 4 updates since then. All right. So we have a question. Does Cubase support more than 9 MIDI devices? I ran into a problem with the Korg Nano Control 2 as a Cubase quick control. So, Cubase can, so there are 8 quick controls, but, in my setup, I think I have 16 MIDI in and out, or I guess 18 with some USB in my studio computer. So, but for quick controls, you could have 8 quick controls at a time, and then you could just, if you wanted to adjust quick controls for a particular instrument, you could, come over there, reassign the quick controls, and be able to just, save it as a preset and be able to access more parameters. Okay, so a question from Tame. How to use the revert function? How's it intended to use? And when reverted, which version and what state does the reverted project go to? So let's say, like, as I do in the live streams, as you people, as regular viewers will come back, you will see me revert a lot. So let's say I'm just, for like in this case, I've destroyed a perfectly good project that someone's painstakingly set up and produced, and I just want it to go back to its last saved state, and that's what the revert does. So when I'm doing my demonstrations on my system, I always want to go back to like the starting off position. So it's kind of like these conditions are set up for demonstration. So I'm kind of unique in that. So if I've gone through and just made all sorts of horrible edits, I can now come and select revert, and this will go back to the last saved position. So at this point, it'll now just go directly back to where I started. And because I haven't saved through an auto backup system or anything like that, so I disable that for just my workflow of demonstrating features. So, but that's what it does. Okay. So just see further question about, it says I ran about does Cubase support more than 9 MIDI devices? I ran into a problem with Korg Nano Control 2 as a Cubase quick control. Had to delete half my MIDI devices to get it working. So yeah, just, try, just have your quick controls assigned here. So you can say, okay, I want to see all of my sends for this particular track. So I will come over here, say, okay, I wanted to go to my quick controls, and now I want this to be my volume pre-play. Now I just want to go to my send. So you can control multiple parameters with those 8 devices, and you could use the other 8 parameters not just for quick controls, like if you have 16 or whatever, but assign them also in the generic remote for other functions, for transport, or and here you could have I think 64 per bank. So and then you could just kind of build from there as you see fit. Okay, hello. I have pre-recorded MIDI, like audio pre-record 60 seconds. So, the MIDI is actually a bit more sophisticated. So, and with MIDI, it's called retrospective record. So if I have an instrument track here, and let's say, one of the running jokes I hear from my composer friends is like, oh, I haven't actually hit record in years, because often they play the best parts of all time when they're actually, let's go to some of the Imagineer library here. So let's just try some of these. I think Gary Gibbons does wonderful work, so check out these banks. So it's like, oh, I just played the most amazing melody, but of course I wasn't recording. So you could actually in Cubase just click right here, and that will insert the retrospective record. And, we could go up to 10,000 events. And if you wanted to, come right over here to the retrospective record, you could, even insert it as a linear recording. If you did it in a loop, you could have it in a loop. So you could just kind of come right over here. Anything that you've done, just go to the right here. And this is kind of updated in 10.5 to some significant retrospective record. So just whatever is played, so you have your song position here. You got, okay, I'm just played the most beautiful melody. And go, oh, it's lost for the ages. Just hit retrospective record button, and now it's been captured. So you could keep probably way more. I think it's 10,000 MIDI events per track, maybe, or 10,000 MIDI events that you could just have. That's going to be captured in the buffer for you. All right, so you see Quaver Love Studio has to take off. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Jared Davis. Is there a way to bounce stereo tracks into 5.1 tracks similar to how you did with dual mono tracks to a stereo track? So certainly. So if I wanted to take, these 5 tracks here, let's say I want to do 6. So say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now what I could do is just go to... So I'll just go to convert tracks, and I'll say mono to multi-channel, and instead of stereo, I'll choose 5.1, hit OK. So I'll just do... So just try this again. But yeah, it's the same principle. I probably just have different lengths on something, but you could just kind of do it like that. So same concept. All right, so Sable Winters wants people to hit the like if you found this helpful. Usually takes about 30 minutes to reach questions. So until then, enjoy. All right, so see, we're at 92 likes, so we're close to 100. So thanks and we hope that people, for new users, are subscribing to the channel so you can be notified of future events. Just seeing some more discussion on 5.1, and Gareth saying, Bob Clearmountain is a guy to look for music 5.1. I've gotten to work also. Check Elliot Shiner's work is always amazing to me, and I think Chuck Ainley's mix. I remember one time I was working at Mark Knopfler's studio helping solve a problem. He flew me out to London to fix something, and getting to hear in Mark's studio, which is pretty amazing, British Grove Studios. In London, and hearing the 5.1 remix as it just came back from being mastered from Bob Ludwig, and listening to it in the studio for the first time. So if you get to listen to Brothers in Arms, but Chuck Ainley did an amazing 5.1 mix of that as well. So check those out. Okay, so we see from Kerwin Young, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. Thanks, Greg. It's about reordering the markers. This helps a whole lot. So I just learned that trick today too. So luckily there's like a bunch of really smart people in Germany to make me look smart in my job. Okay, so we see from William Baker, MIDI instrument on track 1, use input from MIDI controller. The MIDI instrument on track 2 uses same MIDI controller. MIDI instrument on track 1 also responds while playing recording on track 2. So if you want those to be independent, so let's do just a new project. Okay, so let's say I had 2 retrologs, and I want these to have different sounds. So let's say I want more of our synth pad. Let's say on... All right, so let's say here we're going to have synth pad. And let's say I want more of synth here. Okay, so now I will... All right, so now I come here, I have the same MIDI controller. So if I wanted to, I could have, if my MIDI controller, let's say I have this set to MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2, and it's still layering both of them together. So we'll have just that sound. And if I kind of lower the other one, all right, so let's just... All right, so that will be our kind of pad sound, and I go here, and this will be... Let me just do something more different. Okay, so now we have these two sounds layered. All right. Okay, so when we do this, so it says, so you have MIDI instrument on track 1 uses input from MIDI controller. Then MIDI instrument track 2 uses the same MIDI controller. MIDI instrument track 1 also responds when playing recording on track 2. So if you have different MIDI controllers, all you have to do is, let me just reread this, make sure. Okay, so if they're both record enabled, and we have this set for all MIDI inputs, my one controller is going to send, MIDI to both those devices. If I wanted to only go to one of the devices, or only to this one, I would just. And if I wanted them both to capture the same MIDI input. Now, if we had different controllers and these were on different MIDI channels, and let's say my controller was set up as a zone, or, the bottom half is MIDI controller 1, the top half is MIDI controller 2, you could go to the MIDI input transformer and set up your transformer, and there's presets for channel filtering. So you can say, I only want MIDI channel 1 to be on this key, and on this note, I only want MIDI channel 2. So I can say, let's come over here to channel filtering and pass channel 2. But, if they're both armed without an input transformer, they're both going to accept the same, information. So it's telling it, and if you have different MIDI controllers, you can say, okay, I want, my Nectar to be this controller, to be the controller for this track. And instead of choosing all MIDI inputs, you can say, I want my Steinberg, UR24C, that MIDI input dedicated for this track. So, but otherwise, if you have the same input and you have both tracks record enabled, it's going to record the same information. So. Okay, reading through comments. Okay. All right, so we have, hi Greg, greetings from Poland. Is there a way to keep the loop region at its bar position when changing tempo of a project? Okay, so let's say if I come here. All right, so let's say if I have this here. So let's say I'll just set a quick loop region. Okay. So you want to keep the loop region at its bar position when changing tempo of a project. So I will change my tempo. Okay, so we see that the loop region is maintaining its bar position as we do this. So the region is here, but if we wanted to place these tracks, so say if I have I'll just throw in a quick drum loop here. Jump back, different category. Okay, so let's say now when I come, and let's say that's my loop region. So if this is set into, we have two different modes. So we could have the time base of this track be based in linear mode or musical mode. So when we see the little quarter note with an orange background or kind of illuminated background, I'm terrible with color names. I missed that day in preschool. This is in linear mode. So now when I adjust the tempo, it's going to stay at its bar and beat position. But now if I put this into linear mode, as I adjust the tempo of this particular event, I'm just going to take this out of musical mode to start with. Let me just do that. So let's disable musical mode. And I have this event. So I change it to tempo now, and it's in linear mode. And as it's in linear mode, I could just see that, it's going to, the audio is going to play back the same tempo, but since I'm changing the tempo, the bar and beat positions are different. Now, if I put this into musical mode and change the tempo of the track, you can see that, and I'll put this into musical mode here, that as we change, that relationship between like the loop and the bar and beat is going to be constant. So if make sure that you try toggling the status of musical mode for the event or for the track. All right, just seeing some great discussion of the glory days of DTS and 5.1 surround mixing. So yeah, it's a shame that it didn't take off. Just having a discussion with Dave Miles Huber last night about that. So. All right. Just see Christian D68 just saying about our surround music discussion. It says, I remember old hidden track on Eagles DVD and DTS, only voices incredible. So yeah, that was done by Elliot Shiner if it was the Eagles reunion concert. So I see my English geography pronunciations are okay for Gareth, so I feel honored. Okay. Okay, just finding my space in the chat field. Right, just trying to find my space in the discussion. So. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. Sorry for a delay. All right, so you see, hey, Greg, I never used Control Room. Now I need. Could you explain how to have two different mix for speakers and headphone singer, please? Cubase Pro 11. All right, so check it out. right. Let me just see if I can find. Okay, so let's say if I want to do this quickly, I'll just get to. Okay, so when we want to do different like headphone or cue mixes for our performers to make it easier for them, and often this will make a big difference in their pitch and intonation. So let's say if we have the different musicians will want to have like a what's often called a more me headphone mix. So okay, so let's say I needed to send a headphone mix to the singer where she hears herself louder than what we're listening to in the control room. So what we could do is I'm going to go to go to your studio setup, and we want to make sure that we have like a headphone mix. So we want to add a cue mix, and then we'll just call this like vocals. Okay, so what I want to do is we'll go to our big full screen mixer. We'll go to the racks, and let's make sure that we have cue sends checked so that they're visible in the racks. And we will just go ahead and scroll down till we see our cue sends. All right, so we'll open up our cues. And what I want to do is to select all of the tracks. And I'm going to right click, and you may have to kind of right click a couple times, but try right clicking. And what we want to do is to activate cue sends, and this is going to turn on the cue sends. And so what I'm going to do is, and I guess I didn't keep the name, but we're going to just come over here. So we listen to our cue mix of what's going on. And what I want to do is to take the current mix that's used. So I'm going to right click, and you'll see use current mix levels. So now that we've done that, I can just come over here. As we adjust, I'm going to come over here. So we play. So we're going to say this is where our singer is. What I want to do is say, okay, we're going to take our vocalist here. And you could adjust the amount of how much the singer is hearing in their cue mix. And then all you have to do is, so as we adjust this, we could send this, this track more to the vocalist cue mix, and these tracks we want to send less of. And at that point, you could just audition between the different cue mixes here in the control room. So this way, this is being sent to an independent headphone mix for the different musicians. So, and each one of these levels. But if you right click here, just go to all cues, use current mix levels, current pan settings, and then you should be all set. And you can have an independent headphone mix for the vocalist, and independent headphone mix for the studio. Sorry, let me get my cable out of the way. It's buzzing. All right. Okay, seeing more discussion of kind of concerts that were done in quad and surround sound. Okay, so you just see Sable Winters comments like, whoa, wait, retrospective record? So, all right, so a lot of great discussion, just reading through it, make sure I'm not missing any questions. Okay, so I just see Millard Brown, and this is to Tammy's question. It says, with VST2 device, I get Thunderbolt when I added note expression, hovering gets message, and incoming MIDI channels seem to be rotating. You should consider create to use a note expression device. So let me see if I have an older VST2 instrument. I think I may, let's see if I may have one third-party one I install for this. Let's see if this is. Go to my VST plugin manager and let's go to instruments. Okay, so I have Tal Noisemaker VST. So let's say if I add an instrument track of that. Okay, and now I go to my expression maps. So I still don't get kind of a little icon here, but you know, again, Tammy, if you're using it with VST2 instruments, it's not going to work with note expression anyway. So. All right, lots of great discussion on 59 Corvettes. People that got to see all the cool concerts and have all the cool cars. So I see if auto backup is turned on, does hitting revert go back to the last auto save of the project or go to a state when you open the project? So I think it's to the last saved instance of the project. All right. So we see nice comment from Jazz Dude. Sorry, Greg, we're in a nostalgia mood today. So that's good. I wish I could have seen all the cool concerts. Okay, sorry, just finding my space in my chat field. Okay, so I just see, hey, Greg, does it really make such a big difference in working memory whether I have one instrument of 16 NI contact, I hate it, or don't really understand a workflow with multi-instruments? So it's not really affecting the memory, but how the instruments, how they scale across the multi-core processors. So generally most, I think Contact does this, but most instruments you run a single instance that's only running off of one. It's just how, the programs, all the programs work this way, So if you run 16 instruments and you have like a 16 core processor, and you run 16 instruments in one instance of Contact, I'm pretty sure that it will only utilize one processor for that. And your other 15 processors are going to be just, looking envious of the one processor that's overloading. So, but if you took one instance, one sound, and put it into 16 instances of Contact, that it would spread the CPU multi-core usage across more evenly. So you could, so it's not memory, but more processor scaling and multi-processor setup. All right, so I just saying Miller Brown is also doing some investigation at his end with Tan May's question. It says, so in Studio Sub devices, I used add device to get a MIDI note expression input device. Now the Thunderbolt says to play MPE expression set to MIDI track to MIDI channel any. So let's see if I could recreate that. So I will add an MPE device. Okay, and so I'm going to set that to an MPE device to a VST2 instrument and double click, and I still don't have that. But, once again, Tamay, if your instruments aren't VST 3.5 or higher, then they're not going to work with that particular function. So. Okay, we have a question. What's the best way to take separate out of drums instrument like kick, snare, hi-hats from one MIDI or instrument track? So if you wanted to separate the audio, you could do that quite easily. So let's say if I just go to my jump off project here. So, if I wanted to have separate, I'm not sure if you wanted to separate the actual sounds themselves or... so if I look at my mix console, let's say I go to my mix console here and I go, let's open up the instrument. So I play. All right, just. Okay, so if I wanted this to play out of multiple outputs here, I could go to my mixer, and different instruments will work differently. But I could say, okay, I want my snare out of output 2. Let's say my hi-hat out of out 3, and I could come over here, say out 4, out 5. So now these are spread to different outputs and they're kind of split. But if I wanted to take a MIDI pattern, MIDI data, and split that to different instruments, all I'd have to do is I come here and I can see that I have my different parts on instruments. I could select the event here. And all I had to do now is go to MIDI and choose to dissolve part, and we could separate pitches. And as we do that, each one of those will now be automatically put into their own tracks. so we can see the kick, snare, hi-hat, overheads, and the different MIDI parts can all be split that way. Okay, what are some audio interfaces that are able to deliver surround output from Cubase or Nuendo? So generally, how it works is, it's all you need is 6 analog outputs for 5.1. And so, often it's going to be 1/4 inch or XLR outputs. And you take those into your monitoring system, often now powered speakers. So all it is, so there's no encoding going on, so you could do all of your mixing in 5.1. You just need an audio interface with 6 outputs. All right, so we see more discussion from let's see if we can get this little lightning bolt figured out for Tanmay. So let's say do this. Just create a part. And go to the expression map. So you see that, but let's say if I put this directly to a input channel. So let's say if I go directly from panorama in, let's go to note expression. So I appreciate Millard helping. I can't get it to be there, but again, if the instruments don't do that, it might be a moot point. Okay, reading through different comments. All right, I see Michael Pierce is back. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Sorry, my chat field's just being jumpy today. Keeps jumping back to real time, so. Okay, so it says I have a lot of instrument tracks with complete as the VST, and the instances of complete have a contact inside them. My question is, can I use Cubase to purge all the samples so I load faster, etc.? So many times, it's not Cubase that needs to purge the samples, it's the instrument itself. So I know in Hallian, if I wanted to, I'll just add a quick instance of Hallian. There's probably something very similar in complete or in Contact, but when I go to Hallian, one of the cool things is you could come over here and just kind of unload all of the unused samples. So that's kind of one of the functions that you could do inside of Hallion, is just to, as samples are loaded up and it's being routed to a particular instrument, that you could basically just have Hallion unload all of the unused samples for you. So I'm just trying to remember where that is, but so that's not necessarily, it's how the instrument is going to deal with it. So I'm sure that there's something maybe in Contact that does the same thing. All right, wonderful to see Grant Nicholas on the live stream. Hope you're doing well. Okay, so another question, kind of, can you show how a Q mix gets sent to one of the headphone pairs of the musicians? I've always wondered how to monitor that from the performer's perspective in the studio. All right, so come over here. All right, so let's say I have this going on and I wanted to have like bass, drums, and guitars and listen to their Q mixes. So I'm going to just come over here. So I have all the channels selected, and what I want to do is, again, we'll just kind of right click and I'm going to activate all of the Q sends. Let's get to the racks and show the Q sends. And what I want to do now is to use the current mix levels of all the Q sends. Okay, so let's say we have our drums here. So I'm going to select all my drums and let's send more of the drums to, and I'm just going to activate quick link. So I'm going to take all the drums and make all the drums louder for the drummer. And take the bass, make the bass louder for the bass player, and let's say this is our guitars. It's called something else right now. So as I want to listen to it now, we could see. So if I wanted to listen to the Q mixes, I could just come right over here and say, there's my drums. And I want to go to the bass. So let's go, so this way, everything else is kind of down in volume. So there's my drums are louder in that mix, and I'll have bass louder in that mix. So if I want the kick to be louder, I could take off my Q link here and say, okay, I want the kick to be louder in the bass player's headphone mix. And the drummer wants to hear more of the bass, so we send the bass to the drummer's headphone mix. And we could listen to what's going on in the studio versus what's going on in the Q mixes, and you could audition to hear the Q mixes in real time like that, just directly from your control room. All right, so we have a question. Can I transfer mixer settings, or channel counts, fader levels, plugins, example compressor from one project to another? So if you're here, what you could do is, there's a couple different ways of doing that. One is to just, you see this little drop down menu. You could, take the selected channels and save the selected channels, and that will be carried over. One other method of doing this is you could say, I want to do a new project, and let's say I'll come here, let's do a new project, and I want to take like the drums from that project, and I'm going to import tracks from project. So I'm going to come over here. So let's go to Amos Moses, and I'll take that particular project there. So we're going to select that project, and I'm going to say, track data to be imported. So I'm going to say not the events, and I want all the drums to be imported without the audio files. So at that point, I could just come right over there, and that will just normally just kind of load that up. Give me a second. We'll see if my... May have to reboot here. Just give me a second, see if I can get it back. May have to reboot my computer real quick. All right, I'm just going to reboot my computer. If you guys want to just hang on, I'll be back in just about 2 minutes. My computer, we have weird IT stuff, so sometimes it takes a little while to reboot. But just bear with me for a minute or two, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm going to do a quick test, make sure everything's coming through. All right, so I think I'm back, but I'm just going to do a quick audio test and make sure. Bear with me just for a minute. I'm just making sure the audio is coming through. Okay. All right, so sorry about that. We have some weird IT encryption that takes my computer forever to reboot. All right, so let's go back to our questions. So I just see from Danielle, is it possible to listen to some Hallian sonic sounds? So you've kind of been hearing them throughout the whole, these are some of the included sounds that are all available, in Hallian Sonic SE. But you've been kind of hearing the sounds, all the instruments that you're hearing are mostly coming from Hallian Sonic SE in particular projects. So, but if there's like a particular sound that you want to, listen to, but our musical history laid out on the floor. So like the flutes, pianos, all these are, coming from than where I try to get all George Martin on it. So all these are kind of stock Howley and Sonic sounds. So, and then we'll hear it in context. So, but if there's any particular sounds you want to listen to, Danielle, just let me know. Okay. So just see from Tanmay says no MPE device added, and then like indicating that Serum is maybe MPE compatible, but I don't think your controller, you said you had the Arturia controller, is that MPE compatible? So I think that's okay. So sorry, I think audio's back now. Let me just, my whole computer just kind of shut off unexpectedly. Don't know what, just kind of like, it was like a power surge of something, but it was on battery. So apologize for that. Let's see if we get back. Okay. Okay, so we see questions. Since I have the latest update on Cubase 11, my iMac is sound noise when I put two audio interfaces together. Do you know what is the issue? So generally that could be, you know, when the computer gets more noise, it could be, you know, more indicative that something is causing the heating in the computer to overload. So I'm not sure if it was different before, but it could be that, you know, it's just needing more power, and, you know, so it's not a setting that is kind of turned on or off by Steinberg. It's kind of done by the Mac OS when the fan is kicked in. So, so I'm not sure if it's only when you're using the two interfaces together you get that. Okay, so just see a comment from Jazz Dude. So you see Steinberg respawn Hallian 6 and let thousands of sound designers make free libraries for Hallian Sonic SE. So, you know, that's a lot of, you know, we see a lot more, you know, content coming available. You know, if you kind of look at all the content that's been released for, you know, not only Hallian, but also with, you know, Retrolog and Pad Shops, there's lots of content that are being released, you know, all the time. So, okay, so I see a question from Grant Nicholas. Greg, are you using headphone amps out of your audio interface for Q mixes? So I have an MR816, kind of the older Steinberg interfaces, and it has two independent headphone outs, and then I take two outputs from the and I have two of the interfaces connected. So I take two outputs from the other one, and then I could feed that into, so I don't have to use any headphone amps, because I daisy chain two of them. That gives me 4 headphone amps. So, but before I had those interfaces, I had some inexpensive Rolls headphone amps, and they worked. So no one ever complained about it. Okay. Just gonna make sure audio is going through. Okay. Okay, so just see from Tanmay, can you ask the software developers about the Thunderbolt icon, just to be sure that we're not missing some useful hidden feature within Cubase? Since it's deep software, I'm just really curious. So I'll see if I could, you know, play around with it some more. But, you know, it could be that, you know, because you don't have an MPE compatible controller. So Okay, so we just see a question from Dave McKay. So wonderful to see you here. So, Greg, you're doing a fantastic job as usual. Can you and John Barron schedule a joint session about interactivity between Cubase and Dorco sometime? So, yeah, we're in discussion of that. We're currently in discussion of kind of planning that because we have to do kind of a presentation on that for a big school in America in June. So we're just so I just sent him an email right before our live stream. So, and hopefully we'll be able to, maybe I could join him on a Discover Dorco session. That would be fun. Okay, so we have a question. Can you explain the best way to find tempo from a loop? All right, so if I have a loop here, okay, I'll do a new project. All right, so if you have a loop and you don't know what the tempo of it is, okay, so what you could do is just kind of listen to the loop. So a lot of times, let's say I don't have it in musical mode. So I'm here, and this loop is, not lining up to the beat, and I wanted to find out what the tempo of this loop is. So we'll go ahead and play it. I'm going to listen to it and count the number of beats. 2. So just kind of start over again. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. All right, so I counted 16 beats, so 4 measures of 4/4 time. I'm going to close my door. My son will invade. He just got home from school. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, so I counted 16 beats, and what I want to do now is to come over and I'll go to the beat calculator, and I'm just going to type in 16 beats. And I could say import at tempo track start or at selection start. And at that point, we can just automatically figure out that this loop is 140 beats a minute. I'm just going to talk to my son real quick. Hang on. All right. My son's weekend has started ahead of me. All right. All right. So we just see a question from Jeff Sabelski. I think it's finale was such a staple. How's Dorco doing with the professionals? So Dorco is doing wonderfully well. So it just kind of keeps getting more and more used. And I think it's just kind of the momentum of development and the momentum of expectations of those customers are very much aligned with Dorco. So it's a question from Sub 403, Greg. Is there a key command to reset all modules in Supervision? So let me go take a quick look. Okay, so while we're here, let's say if I want to take this, if you hold down Alt or Option, and just click here. That will reset. I'll just put this on maybe just a quick loop. So when I go to, it's not a key command, but if you'll see kind of the reset, you could reset a particular module, or if you hold down Alt or Option, you could then reset all of the modules. So just Alt or Option, and that will just reset there. But not a key command to do that. You may be able to do it through generic remote. Okay. Reading through questions. I know we had some questions that were emailed in. Okay, just reading through. So okay, just reading through comments. So that's a great discussion while my computer was rebooting. Okay, so we have a question. Is track delay in inspector window works while recording and listen through monitor button, or must use delay plugin? So when we have your track delay plugin here, this is only going to be affecting the playback of the track. So you're not going to hear it while it's recording. It's not, so it's really for playback only. So if you need it to kind of shift stuff a little earlier or later in time, you could adjust the track delay, and the values are in milliseconds. And sometimes I've seen a lot of people do this just to kind of maybe, change the position to get a different feel on a compressor, to have the audio track kind of play back and compress, had the compressor kick in a little faster just by doing kind of a pre-delay. That was kind of a great Michael Wagner trick he showed me that he does a lot. Okay, so I see Gareth is going to send me a song to play bass on over the weekend, so looking forward to it. We see Michael Teams still has some Rolls headphone amps too. All right, so I just see, what was the voodoo with the beat calculator? Did it stretch the second track? So no, it actually just, the second track just kind of matched up because it's the same loop. So if I just wanted to come here, so as soon as I go to the beat calculator, so let's say, so this now, once I insert the tempo, so we say, okay, this is going to be 16 beats. And then once I put it at the selection start, so now that we have it 16 beats, we can just match the tempo that it calculates. So it'll be, So as soon as we hit enter, then this will now, the tempo is going to change, and this one is probably in musical mode. So let's say if I take this out of musical mode, it'll now, so that was automatically going to fit, but we could just say insert at selection start, and that would automatically put the tempo change right there. So okay, so we have a question. I will be working out of a commercial studio and want to install Cubase without the content and make it so it doesn't search for content. Is there a way to do that? So, if the content isn't on there, it's not going to search for it unless it's looking for it through Media Bay. So it's not going to actually, look for content that Cubase is not expecting to look for if it's not defined in Media Bay. But if it's been defined in Media Bay and then goes away, that's when you get the messages. Okay, question. What is the most natural sounding time stretch algorithm when stretching loops, etc., in musical mode? So when, it could really depend on every single loop could be different. And that's why I would start with probably, Elastic Pro time. That would be the one I would look at. And then, you could experiment and see if the other ones make a difference for you. But that would probably be the one that I would go to by default. All right, so just reading through discussions of whether to go with the indie label or put it out yourself from Tan May. So lots of great feedback from everyone. Okay, so we have a question. When I drag chords track into MIDI, it's slightly going toward the right. Why? All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just add a quick instrument track. Okay, and let's add a chord track. Okay, so let's see if I drag these out to MIDI. So I'm not sure if you have, could be, check if you have snap turned on. So you could try just hitting J and make sure your snap is turned on, and also that it's set to grid and maybe not to grid relative. So those are some things to check, but mine just kind of seemed to snap. So try hitting the letter J and see if it's, if your snap is activated and it's set to grid. Okay, Cubase Pro 11. Sorry, my chat field is jumping all over me today. Okay. How do I set control surface fader to both select the track and control volume? So I'm not sure what control surface you have, but I just have a CC121. So if I wanted to, and this is like a single fader unit. So let's say if I add a number of audio tracks, we can, often you'll have the ability to navigate to the next track or a bank of tracks. And you could see often like a little white outline, like if you have an 8-channel, kind of like a Mackie control type of controller, you'd see like a little 8 outline that would indicate exactly which bank of 8 tracks is selected. So there's often a bank button where you could go, you could increment by 8 channels at a time, or a single channel button. And then you should see kind of the faders. So you'll see like a little kind of white outline around the tracks or around the faders indicating which are currently selected. Okay, I see a question from Miller Brown. Greg, is it possible to add notes by mouse click in Dorico 3.5 SE? So yeah, you could definitely do that. So let's say if I just wanted to go to Dorico real quick. So you could just do that. And there's a function, it kind of is set up that way by default. And you could, just kind of come over and let's say I'll just do a new empty project. So once we're in Dorico, let's say I'll just go to write. And then, now that you have this on, so you could just have, at the point where the mouse is only for selection, but you could just kind of, double click, and let's just go ahead and put notes in directly with your mouse like so. So that's really kind of all you have to do. All right, so I know we had some questions that were emailed in advance, so let's get to those. Sorry for my computer just getting weirded out. All right. Okay, so we had a question was how to find and fix phase issues in recordings. Okay, and we often see this with like drum parts or maybe a direct recording of a source and it's going into an amp as well. So I think we could look at maybe some drum overheads here and take a look. Okay, so let's say we're playing along and I want to take 2 overhead drum tracks and I'll solo these. Okay, so I'm going to go to my Supervision plugin, and I think I made a quick preset of just showing phase stuff. All right, so when we look at this is pretty good phase. Now, if I wanted to, and when we see tracks that are kind of out of phase, often if you look at the waveform and you kind of really, just dive in and really zoom in on the waveform itself, let's say of these 2 tracks, you would notice that as you zoom in, that the one track, while the fader, so let's say between these 2 tracks, that, as one of the tracks is going up, you may notice that the other track, if it's out of phase, may be going in the opposite direction. So if I was to select this particular track, let's say, we kind of see that these are going up and down roughly at the same times. And if I wanted to flip the phase on a particular track, I could, so when we look at kind of the supervision to start with, we can see that it's a pretty healthy phase relationship. So I'll come here. When we see nice vertical structure, we see most of this not being read. We see this to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and get the guitars out. Let's just listen to just the drums. But if I take the drums now, I'm going to select one of the tracks and I'm going to invert the phase. So now when we see that this one is going up, this one's going down, the two will then kind of cancel each other out. And when we go to our phase, at this point, I could just say, let's just... And I could also just kind of flip the phase on the channel here. So now that we have our channel kind of flipped out of phase, we can see that this becomes way more horizontal than vertical. And we see that, and we can see which particular frequencies are out of phase. And we see this here, kind of in the left-hand side, we have phase issues there. And so you can kind of hear it. So how a lot of people would check before having a phase meter is they would just come over here to like a mono button on a down mix. So if we come here, we can say, okay, let's just go to, our down mix preset. So I'll just say, I'll go to the main, and people would say, okay, dude, listen to mono. And when you hear collapse like that, that's kind of indicative of phase. So if you wanted to switch between stereo and mono down mix to check phase, that would give you a pretty good indication. So if I reverse the phase, we could hear that it doesn't just completely die. But now if we wanted to look at that visually with the, let's say our insert here, we see this go much more horizontal. And when I flip the phase on the channel again, which we can do on every single track, we can see that immediately will get more vertical, and we'll see kind of the, frequencies not going out of phase. All right, so next question. Hello, Greg. Do you think that Groove Agent will be a real style agent, including bass and key agents like the styles in Yamaha Genos? I mean, Groove Agent SE may be coming 2021. Thank you. And this is from Dieter in Berlin. So I haven't heard of any plans for kind of more automated styles that were often found in keyboard workstations, but I will definitely kind of pass it on. We used to do stuff like that way back, probably 1994, and it was called Style Tracks, and it came originally in a program called Music Station. So we did it a long time ago. So, all right. We had a question. I use an external synth both as an instrument and sometimes as an external effect with the same inputs coming from the computer either way. What's the right way to set it up in the audio connections? If I make an external instrument, I can't route effects to it and get them to return to the right inputs because they're already taken by instrument. If I take it in external effect, I can't use it like an external instrument. So when we have external instruments and effects, sometimes it can be a little confusing because we don't see like a preset here. But what you can have is set it up as a favorite. So you can say, okay, I wanted to come over here to an external effect. And at this point, I could just click on add favorites. So, and as we go to favorites, you could just, come right over here, save that as a favorite. So when you want to use the device as an external instrument, you call it up as a favorite in your external instrument. If you wanted to use it not as an external instrument, but in an external effects, at that point, you just kind of can call it up as a favorite here, and it will still maintain the input and output configurations. Okay. Okay, then we had someone who wanted me to kind of create a quick score editor function. So I think I have let me find the file here. I'll put in a couple of bars of how to input this in the score editor. Okay. Okay, so I'll just do a new project and it's going to be like a melody and piano. So I will just add 2 MIDI tracks or 2 instrument tracks and we'll just send them to nowhere. So should just add it 2 at once. All right. Okay, and this example is in 3/4. Get my keyboard on the right computer. That'd be helpful. All right. Okay, so just put in a couple of measures here. Okay, so what we want to do is, let's say this will be our piano. And let's say melody. Okay, so I can go to the score editor. So if I wanted to, see them both at the same time, I could select both events. And let's say for my piano, okay, so I'll just come here. So we're going to have, so let's just say on this one, I want it to be a grand staff at C3. So let me just see if I could just make the notation a little larger here. So let's go ahead and just kind of put in some of the notation. So let's say, and if I, without playing it in, I'm just going to click and say, okay, I want this to be G. We're in the key of, looks like C. So I will, all right, so we're going to have a little pickup note. Switch my rhythm here to half notes. Okay, so I'm just going to turn on very quickly the overlay editor. Okay, so say now I wanted to put in just a G as a half note here. All right, and I'm just going to switch to 16th notes. So let's say we're going to go A. Right, and this is going to be just a quick dotted value, so I'll just adjust the length. All right, and we'll just kind of put back to quarter notes, so say So that's kind of like, quickly what you want to do with rhythms. And there's also some text in there for lyrics. So let's go ahead and we'll go to others and we'll put in our lyrics here. So now we could just kind of, I'll just put the text in. So hit tab. That'll take me to the next word. So that's kind of, what you can do with that. And it's really kind of the same process for, for the other, voices. But here, so, once you have kind of the, the grand staff and that, and just kind of enter in the different values. So you could do it, obviously you could play it in, but that will get you started with that. So hopefully that'll make sense. All right, let's go back to, it's from Jeremy. All right, let's see, we got just a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Okay, so we have a question. Can you get add track preset to work if you right click in the mixer area? So let's take a look. So we just say using track preset, and then you could just kind of have your track preset just by kind of right clicking. So give that a shot. To see from Michael Pierce, it'd be interesting to get Junkie XL on here sometime. So next time I talk to him, I haven't talked to him in a while, but next time I'll ask him. I'm not sure if he'll do it, but he's usually pretty busy. Okay. Sorry, my chat field's jumping. Okay, so we just see from Michael Pierce, I'm sure there used to be a phase invert button in the inspector tab in the left-hand side of the main window. Has that gone, or have I probably missed something? So I don't think that the phase invert is there. It's always kind of, and I don't think like the pre-section isn't there, so it's just going to be found in the channel strip itself. So you could just do it directly from there. All right, so question, Greg, is there any talk down the line to be able to resize all the VST instruments, plugins, etc.? Things are getting smaller and smaller as more features are added. So there's always kind of, discussion of finding the right balance because you want to be able to see a lot of information, but maybe not necessarily in a lot of space. So, some plugins can be rescaled. Like, you see Supervision can be, freely scaled however you want. But, we don't have that capability with, third-party plugins, for instance. So we may not, so some plugins can do that. Some need to be kind of fixed to show all different aspects. So, there's lots of work being done with, independent scaling and, high DPI. There's a tremendous amount of work doing that for the last two major versions. So. All right. Okay, so I think we're probably just about out of time. Let's see if there's one last minute question we can get to before we wrap up. Okay, so we just see a question. Sometimes I use Cubase and Darko at the same time, and I can't solve the crackling problem. The audio settings are the same, and the buffer size should not be a problem. So I think that often, when you're, just because they're both using the same audio engine, but they're not sharing it. So it's not really kind of designed to be run concurrently, but, hopefully we'll see that, more integration coming. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. And if you're celebrating Mother's Day, I hope all the mothers out there will have a wonderful time and get to celebrate with family. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday for the next live stream. So 1:00 U.S. Eastern. Send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And everyone take care, and please be safe and healthy. Goodbye.